Well, hello. I'm here with Doug to talk about hot garbage and other things. And it is July 4th, 2025, Friday. Happy Independence Day. And I reckon I'll start with the hot garbage. I was not aware of this, but there's an interesting article. Uh, I'm not there on Bloomberg. And apparently, a bunch of landfills in America are catching fire under the ground and burning and creating hideous toxic sludge that is leaking out and polluting the air and giving the people that live nearby cancer. Apparently, this is a big problem. And so I was unaware of this.
Well, the most famous one,
I vaguely remember one big one that caught fire.
Centralia, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
It was, I think it was Thanksgiving Day. It was the town dump in the early 1960s. And it was very commonplace for people just to dump things over the edge of a cliff, light it on fire, and drive away.
Oh,
I mean, it had been going on for a long time. So somebody came along, and then I think they would use an excavator and just kind of scoop it off, maybe over the edge, and it would fall down.
yeah.
Well, what somebody didn't realize is that there was a coal seam that was there. So they lit it on fire, as they always do. They drove away, and the next thing they know, that seam is on fire. You can't put it out because it's burning underground. And it's been, what, 70 years? The whole town is evacuated. I think there are two people that might still be living there,
Yeah.
but it's burning underneath. And all of a sudden, one day, a tree would just explode into fire because it hit the roots, or somebody's house would burn down.
Oh my
And
God.
people still go there. It's a tourist attraction.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, apparently there's a lot of other places with similar problems I didn't know.
And so these are in the US?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the other place that has this problem, and there's no way to put these fires out.
I guess maybe you could pump a ton of water down there, but that'd probably just create a different huge problem.
Nope. What happens is they tried that. The coal, it puts out the surface, but it still continues to burn underneath. They tried pumping carbon dioxide in, didn't work either.
Man,
They called in the federal government, and right now I guess it's just too big of a fire underground.
man, what a
So
mess.
China, a few years ago, when I think it was either coal prices were high, people were going to the cold fields or the abandoned cold fields. They would pick up pieces of coal that were just kind of left behind, but their cars would accidentally start fires. And China has over 1,000 of these cold field fires.
Wow. Well, that's a problem. Yeah.
So, and I think it's estimated that the amount of carbon dioxide being released by these thousands of fires are something on the order of how much pollution that California drivers produce in a month. I forgot.
Well, that's not
Yeah.
much. You mean the high pollution controls in California? But yeah,
Well, no, I mean from the coal fires, the amount of
yeah,
CO2 that are being released.
yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
I'll tell you one other one. There's Pritchard, Oklahoma. You ever heard of Pritchard, Oklahoma?
no,
So that was a mining town, and they mined specifically for lead and some other metals. I think zinc is combined. So they did that for possibly after the Civil War up through past World War II in the 1970s. And then they realized that all that sand tailings, the piles that they had, were filled with lead, and the kids there weren't doing so well. A lot of kids were getting sick, mental problems, and the townspeople were all evacuated. And if you go to Pritchard, Oklahoma, it's just a ghost town, but there's a Foster's freeze, and you can see hamburgers were 19 cents. And people just kind of like Chernobyl, just kind of picked up and left.
Man,
But
yeah,
that's, yeah, I mean, that's, I guess that's that would be America's Chernobyl,
yeah.
or
Yeah,
Privyet. Isn't that the town they evacuated
I'm not sure.
in
Yeah,
in Ukraine?
yeah,
Yeah. So it's interesting, and I think you can still drive through the town, but there's lead dust and sand, and people said that, yeah, the mine tailings was really fine like sand. And so we used to take bags of it home, and the kids would play in the yard, and they'd slide down these mountains of mine tailings that were filled with lead.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah,
So, yeah, anyway, what's your next story?
yeah. Well, so
That's interesting, though,
the
Sam.
Trump
Very interesting.
administration was supposed, there's a whole bunch of educational funding. It goes out by the fiscal year, so it was supposed to go out July 1, but Trump is holding it back. 6 billion, 800 million just for California. And they've already budgeted it, they've already started spending it. And so they're having to cancel all kinds of programs as a result because they've decided, even though it was already approved by Congress, they're doing another, they say they have an ongoing programmatic review to make sure they're not misusing it to subsidize a radical left-wing agenda. So it's unclear who's going to do that, whether that review is really happening, how long that would take, or anything. So everybody's freaking out at all the schools, of course, because as you know, schools run on a shoestring, and the California school districts had planned to use it for teacher professional development, after school programs, services for students learning English, and migrant education. So this is what I expected, especially with Trump passing his big, beautiful bill that basically all funding for science and education would be pretty much gone. And all the grant funded things that you and I participate in will probably not happen anymore. So,
Hmm. So run this by me. Is this part of Project 2025?
well, yes, I think essentially it's part of the
Yeah.
right wing culture war, making sure that nobody is doing anything to help minorities or women or anything or anything discussing climate or anything suggesting that the 2020 election was won by Biden or any other forbidden topic.
Okay.
Through everything in school and making sure that it's all compatible with the far right pack of lies. Just sort of this replace a theocracy, replacing the fact
Yeah.
with the official proclamations of the government. So,
Yeah. Okay. So I guess somebody shared this with me. That's kind of like a Mark Twain quote. Get your facts straight, then distort them at your leisure.
well, there you go. Yep.
Yeah.
And in the same vein, RFK
Uh-oh.
did an interview and he said he's going to use an AI revolution to improve medicine. He's going to replace animal testing and the vaccine adverse events reporting system with AI stuff. And he implored people to stop trusting the experts and instead trust AI. So that's what
Okay.
there was a time a few decades ago when he was actually an anti-pollution advocate, like those garbage dumps. That was better. But anyway, all right, and I thought this is amazing. There's an article about Superman. I didn't know this. When Superman was first written, it was 1938, and it was written by sort of teenagers who ended up in the comic book industry because they couldn't get any other job because they were Jewish and there was discrimination. So he started out as a violent socialist. When there were wrongs to be righted, Superman knocks down doors, dangles suspects from fifth-story windows, crushes their watch, and says, "See how easily I crushed that? I'll give your neck the same treatment." And with this sort of like bad bullying, he rights wrongs like a domestic abuser, an orphanage superintendent who is cruel to children, uh, and mine owners who skip on safety measures, and so on. So he was like a radical socialist enforcer for the first few episodes. And then it got
Hmm.
popular. And then they decided to make it more mainstream. And then the World War II happened, and they knew nothing. You never get your allocation of paper pulp unless you were sufficiently patriotic. Just like now, you know you won't get your allocation of federal money unless you proclaim right-wing talking points. So
So that's interesting. So I know that Superman was one of the first comic strips, right?
yeah, in the 30s he
What
started in the
or
Depression.
comic books,
Yeah,
comic
yeah,
books.
yeah.
Um, because I just heard there was a comic book war that went on between I think Marvel Comics and DC Comics.
Oh, sure. That was happening
Yeah,
when I was paying attention.
yeah.
And
And when did the comic book ban go in, or the
well, the
attempt to
comic book,
ban?
well, the comic book code, I think
Yeah.
came out in the 60s because I remember all the comics I read had this little thing in the corner. And it wasn't until years later I learned what it was. And it also applied to television, had these rules like magic doesn't work. And anybody that uses always does like a fortune teller prediction, it always has to come to a bad end. And things like that are in there. And there's another one like now that if nobody can be shot with a gun. So if you watch like the Power Rangers, they never shoot anybody with a gun. They shoot like the chandelier and the chandelier falls on them, but they never shoot anybody with a gun.
Oh, that's interesting. But that was the comic book code. Before that,
Yeah.
it was considered the work, was it not, of Satan, like chewing gum
Oh,
and
I'm sure.
dancing?
Oh, I'm sure a lot of people felt that way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. A
The far right.
lot of the a lot of the people behind what would be Project 2025 felt that way.
Of course. Yeah. The right wing culture warriors. And speaking of which, I have an entertaining alternative to protesting them. This, have you heard of the orange alternative?
No.
I just heard about it today and looked it up. This was in Poland. They had an anti-communist underground movement, and what they did was the if you would post like a if you would go to graffiti a wall and you'd put an anti-communist symbol, the government would paint over it with white paint. So there were these white splotches all over town. So they started just drawing a little picture of a dwarf with an orange hat on them. And then that symbolized the Orange Revolution and the Orange Alternative. And then they would dress up as dwarves with orange hats and go in the streets, and they would chant things like "dwarf, dwarf, dwarf," and so the government couldn't arrest them, or they would look ridiculous. But this is how they've used absurdist humor for their protest. So it's a pretty good idea. That's why humor and mockery is a big part of effective protest. And in
All right,
particular,
just
yeah,
go ahead.
this way you can protest without technically breaking the rules.
So Sam, I just looked this up. So it was from the comic book censorship campaign was the 1940s to 1950s.
Yeah.
And it was due to concerns about content, which some deem morally objectionable, potentially harmful to children, including perceived religious concerns. They were fueled by a moral panic that led to bans and restrictions at the city and state level.
Yeah.
Organizations like Americans United have actively opposed censorship, including religious based censorship, and continue to advocate for the right to read and learn.
Yeah, yeah. All greatly furthered by right-wing evangelical preachers who were having sex with little boys and prostitutes in between telling us all to be more moral.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit more. Let's see. In 1954, so it was early 54 or early 50s, found that many featured murder, violence, crime, horror, sex, oh no, seduction, fear, and love confessions. He This was in Mississippi County.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you know, the Republicans, even in the last Trump term, they had big book burnings to burn all the books that had like gay characters or something.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the women's there's some women's group that's pushing it now. Moms for Liberty, I think.
Yeah, the Moms for Liberty. There you go.
Yeah, that's the modern version of the same thing.
Yeah, this was in Blytheville, Mississippi, 1954, 55. So that would have been, is that the same time with Father Coughlin. No, he was before that
Oh, he
on
was,
radio.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, but this is we've always had the far right and
Yeah.
always pushing this stuff. But anyway, that's all my politics stuff. Now I got some infosec stuff.
Oh, wait, I got one for
Go
you.
ahead. Yeah.
Remember this company, TikTok?
Well, yeah. I wonder if it's still hot. From what I hear, the young kids have now moved on to something else.
Well, I don't know.
It's Red Bull or something.
TikTok was going to be banned the day before Trump took office, right?
I know it was going to be banned, and then he delayed it because they gave him a bunch of money.
Well,
It turned out that he's popular on TikTok, so they decided not to. In fact, I heard before the election, Scott Galloway's kids told me, or Chris's kids said, "Mom, TikTok is 100% for Trump because the Kamala campaign did not move on to TikTok and Trump did." So it was
well,
probably,
Congress voted
yeah,
to ban TikTok,
yeah,
right? Just kind of quick recap.
for no particularly good reason. But yeah, they claim that the Chinese people are stealing our data and they're going to do something vague, unspecified bad with it.
And if you dig a little bit deeper, there's evidence that claim was made by Facebook, Zuckerberg's
Of course,
group,
of,
Meta.
of course,
So it was banned. The ban was supposed to go in effect before Trump took office. They took the app down. Then, right before Trump took office, they put the app back up over the weekend.
right,
Then Trump takes office and he says, after Zuckerberg donated $1 million and attended his inauguration, uh, Trump signed an executive order saying, well, let's look into this a little bit more. Let's pause and not be too hasty. We'll give it 90 days.
ByteDance also gave him money, I think.
Yeah. So then 90 days passes, and Trump said, well, let's take a look at this a little more.
Yeah,
And I believe in that time, ByteDance, who owns TikTok, was giving $100 million. Now, I think the number that is floating around I think they give $500,000. And now it's up to $10 million.
yeah,
And so Trump just recently said, well, let's not be too hasty.
yeah.
Let's give it another 90 days to think about this.
Right. And that 90 days is just about to run out, right?
No, that 90 days just got extended again.
Oh, okay. Well, this is
So we'll have to revisit this in the fall.
well, this is his favorite technique is to not even sell anything for a bribe, but rent something for a bribe. So you have to keep rebribing him every few months with more. It's a recurring income model.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And since we're on a little bit of politics,
yeah.
AI is back in the news again and legislation over it.
Oh, yeah.
And the states have kind of voiced their opinion that we want control, not the federal government.
Right. Well, that was because of the big, beautiful bill had a provision that said states cannot pass any rules about AI, and they took that out. So now the state
Yeah,
can pass laws. So it'll be like abortion. You can have a patchwork of every state having different random rules.
for AI. So you can't cross
AI
state
companies,
lines with
yeah,
you can't cross state lines with AI on your iPhone.
well, that is one possible outcome. I mean, I actually think it's probably not wise for anybody to regulate AI right now because you don't even know what it is yet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But a bunch
I
of
would
people
agree.
say we took that attitude towards the internet and it got out of control. So we better try regulating AI before it's developed. And I say, I'm not sure that's a good response.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, what do you I got one more story. What's your other story here?
Okay. Well, so Cisco, again, I can't believe they're still doing this. I've been hearing this for at least 8 or 10 years. Cisco again shipped a product with a hard coded default password in it. But they
What?
seem to have, yeah, and I there were like 8 of these in one year, about 6 years ago. It seems like Cisco's engineers must have a huge problem of using coding practices that are at least 20 years out of date. And they keep shipping products. This one is the engineering special build of Cisco Unified Communications Manager, or its Session Management Edition. It has a hard coded root SSH password that cannot be deleted or changed. So after it leaks out, and how hard is it to find that? It's not very hard. Everybody can get root on your stuff. And this has happened many, many times to Cisco. And it's ridiculous, you know.
So is this on their phone system?
No, it's yes, it's for media, phones and other things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not handsets, but it's the backbone that carries the phone calls. Unified
yeah. Got
communications management.
so
Yeah.
it's kind of like the routers or the hardware for the
Yeah.
uh, to direct phone traffic.
Yeah. And I'm just amazed how they can keep making this really old-fashioned mistake over and over and over. They clearly need to
Oh,
review like the quality assurance team at Cisco and knock this off.
yeah, interesting. They're kind of like GM that they just kind of bury these things. They just propagate. Like the ignition key switch that killed 127 people, GM just kind of buried that, saying, "Oh, it's a
Yeah.
driver error,"
Yeah, or
and
they
it
could
turned.
be
Yeah,
using really old code without reviewing it or something.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So call centers have been checking to see how useful AI assistants are, and the answer is not very. I know Microsoft just declared that everyone must use AI, and another company said everyone must use AI because the staff doesn't want to, and you force them to. But anyway, these guys, they this was a Chinese call center, and they found that the AI often inaccurately transcribed customer call audio into text. Um, and because the caller has like accents and pronunciation and speech speed, it also has trouble rendering sequences of numbers. So phone numbers get garbled. And the AI's emotion recognition system works poorly. It will misclassify normal speech as negative emotion. Um, and so people just ignore the emotional tags. And, it's this whole idea of having it somehow process people calling in for you turns out to be a lot less helpful than hoped, which I'm getting a lot. That's why I really think Gartner was right when they put generative AI at the peak of the hype cycle. This is the time when everybody begins to notice this isn't so great. It's got problems and it begins to decline into the trial
yeah.
illusion where everybody turns against it. I think it's definitely sliding that way now.
Got it. Got
Yeah.
it. Got it. All right.
And
Well, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
okay, so this is interesting. Nimdor made Mac malware to steal cryptocurrency, but the attack chain is interesting. They contact you by Telegram and lure you into putting on a fake Zoom update. And when you do, of course, it's malware. But the distinctive thing about the malware is it has a persistence mechanism where it installs custom handlers for the signals SIGINT and SIGTERM. When you close an app that's running, you do it by sending SIGTERM or SIGINT to turn it off. And so that handler is caught and it reinstalls the malware every time you terminate it. So that's pretty clever. So
Yeah,
that's,
but that's nothing new.
well, I hadn't heard of it before. I know the main
No?
thing I see is that you put it in the Windows run key in the registry. But yep, maybe this has been done before, but first I've heard of it.
Yeah, I had from Mark Rusinovich at Microsoft gave me code in Task Manager. It was called Hydra software. So you kill the code and it pops up, right? There are two versions of code running and they keep checking each other. So if you delete one, then as you try to go and delete the other one, it reactivates or reinstalls the one you just deleted. So the only way you could do it is pause and delete, delete.
Right.
But that was kind of proof of concept. It was pretty good.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. You want to
So
do it?
I got one for you, Sam. You're teaching here.
Yeah.
California, as have many other states, but California is the only one apparently that does reporting or detailed reporting on this, which is fraud in financial aid.
Oh,
And ghost students, if you experience ghost students yet?
oh, tons of that. For years at City College, they've been appearing, and for a while I would tell them they didn't know what to do. Now they claim they're taking care of it. And I went and manually found them and deleted them, and then they got mad at me saying your class is too small. So anyway, but yes, there's tons of them. They fill up every possible class.
Yeah, so there's to the tune of, is from what reporters have found, at least $11 million in fraud.
Oh yeah, I think a lot.
And Yeah, and the ghost students are preventing enrollment, so students that need required classes aren't able to enroll.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So you get it. So you get what's going on here.
I have some classes that are highly targeted, um, because they're work experience classes, and so I think there's a whole number of units. Anyway, if you teach like a late start class or a class of 1 or 2 units, they're the ones that just get filled up. But now it's every class. Last semester, every class was absolutely full the first day, and when you look, a bunch of them are fake.
And how do you tell that they're fake?
It used to be they just had sequential student IDs. So they
Uh,
improved the program. Now they have a random student ID, but they never have a profile picture. They have the wrong major. That's mostly how I catch them. Anybody taking my class would have to be in computer science or computer networking. And there's only 5 majors, and it's like business and English and stuff like that. So it's incredibly obvious that they're fake to me because my classes are pretty specialized. If you had a more general class, like English 1 or physics 1, I don't know how you would get them because anybody could be taking those.
right, exactly. Because those are all transfer classes. But so I know that they're going after the Pell Grants, but how do the students collect, or do you know the mechanism behind this?
No, I don't. And that's an interesting issue. I don't know how money financial aid works from the student perspective. Evidently, they're getting some money.
Yeah, so normally you go through the financial aid office,
Yeah.
but I think all financial aid does is assist you in filling out the forms.
I've seen that process. The FAFSA form is incredibly daunting. It's like a 30-page PDF, and you have to fill the whole thing out in one session with no errors. It's like extremely difficult. You really need
Hmm.
someone experienced to help guide you through it.
Yeah, got it, got it. Huh.
Yeah.
Anyway, California, as I said, is the only one that has a requirement to monitor fraud in financial aid. The
Yeah.
other states, we know that there's fraud going on there as well because it goes students, but there's no reporting, so nobody knows how much money is being lost there.
Well, this is
And
one
what,
area where Elon Musk's Doge would have been justified,
yeah,
saying there's a
I
bunch
was
of
just,
data fraud and abuse. Yeah.
I was going to say that. Where's Doge when it comes to this?
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, an AI might be a pretty good way to filter them out.
Yeah, yeah, that might be.
Yeah.
All
Anyway,
right, Sam, what else you got here?
so HP bought Juniper. I didn't know this.
What?
Yeah, HP finished buying Juniper, and I had the same reaction because Juniper I've thought of as pretty advanced and modern and good stuff, and HP I've thought of sort of crappy stuff for decades since Hewlett Packard left. So I would be very, very worried that HP is going to degrade the product, and they haven't explained how they're going to integrate the products yet. But that was interesting news to me. Of course, we won't know. It'll be like, I guess, a year or two before we find out what really happens. Um,
Yeah, so kind of review. HP was one company. They bought Compaq.
yeah,
Then they divided up, what, about 5 years ago? They split
I didn't.
into a computer and printer division. And then they kept the networking hardware, kind of the infrastructure as a separate division.
Yeah,
So this would be, I'm assuming it's got to be the infrastructure. I don't know the exact title of HP, what they
yeah.
used, but
And the
yeah.
infrastructure is pretty well known for being not much good, the HP stuff. But the Juniper stuff is pretty good. So we'll see how this works.
Yeah, HP was, well, early on in the computer industry, didn't do well, but they were scientific and there were the product was good, but it wasn't targeted toward consumers.
Right. I used them when I was doing physics research in the 80s.
Right.
They were the gold standard. It cost twice as much and it really was great stuff if we keep working. But then they degraded the company when Hewlett and Packard left. The next generation of whoever took over kind of ran it into the ground, making cheap.
Yeah.
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 Anyway,
Yeah. Interesting.
so
So we'll see. But boy, is that a surprise.
I know.
I wouldn't have seen that one coming.
No, I didn't know Juniper was for sale, and I wouldn't have thought of HP as the one to buy them.
Yeah, boy, that's interesting.
Yeah. So Meta, glorious Zuckerberg has now shared a vision for a near future in which personal AI superintelligence for everyone forms the beginning of a new era for humanity. And everybody is laughing and saying, we remember 4 years ago when it was the metaverse that was going to change the world, and you wasted billions of dollars developing these crappy cartoony things that did absolutely nothing and nobody cared. And most people are saying this is officially the moment when AI jumps the shark. When Zuckerberg jumps on board, you know it's new technology. And there's
So
some
do
for that. Yeah.
yeah. So I like that term. Is that being thrown out there? Jump the shark,
Oh
nuke the
yeah.
fridge,
What's the second one?
nuke the fridge.
I don't know that one. I know Jumping the Shark is from a TV show. I think
So
it was Happy
jump,
Days, where
yeah,
in the last season they had some Jumping the Shark, and they said this is when this show is over. It's turned into garbage.
yeah. So it's when the main character was water skiing and there was a shark and he jumps over the shark and people said how stupid that is.
Yes.
But it was in the so it was reincarnated for the movies for when I think it was the last Indiana Jones movie when he sees an atomic bomb go off and he runs and he finds a refrigerator. He locks himself in the refrigerator. The blast wave comes along, rolls the refrigerator, I don't know, a mile. It tumbles, 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 and he kind of walks out. I'm making it. I got to make a joke out of this.
Yeah.
But he opens up the refrigerator from the inside. How he does that, we don't know. But he comes walking out and just adjusts his tuxedo because his lapel is off a little bit. I'm joking on that part, but that's as silly, right? As jumping the shark. So they call that nuke the fridge.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah.
And that was kind of like a James Bond movie. That was the beginning of the movie that set the tone.
Yeah. I remember they always have the exciting action scene in the start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
start. But if you know anything about physics or
Yeah.
watched any of the atomic bomb blast, how somebody could see a flash and then realize they need to run to a refrigerator.
Actually, if you're only worried about the shock wave, the light would travel faster. So I guess like a lightning strike, you'd see the flash and you'd have a few seconds before the sound or the waves of moving air would hit you. So I guess that makes sense. You could logically protect yourself from like a concussion by hiding in something. If you're not worried
Yeah,
about
but
radiation or anything, just the physical impact of the concussion wave, that might actually work, I think.
yeah, so I'm just doing a quick check here. It's from the Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
And he survives a nuclear blast by hiding in a refrigerator.
Yeah. Well, if you were at the right distance, like I'm guessing a mile or two, that might actually work because there it's not radiation you're worried about, it's the physical impact of the wind.
Yeah, but do you really think somebody and I think I don't I remember seeing the movie, but I think the refrigerator is out in the middle of the desert someplace.
That's what I
How
said.
would a refrigerator get there? Who
Yeah.
knows? How would he
Yeah.
know what direction to run and just happen to come across? And why would you start running?
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
can see you could argue, but I could justify it anyway. All right. So
All
there's
right, let's continue
Infosec.
on.
So there's a thing called Cat Watchful. And this is actually interesting. It's another one of these spy things you put on a phone. And they say it's invisible. It cannot be detected. It cannot be uninstalled. It cannot be stopped. It cannot be closed. Only you can collect the information, access the information it collects. And they say this is for some legitimate use, like parents monitoring their kids. But the fact that it's so cleverly hidden means it's obviously targeting unlawful stalking of people. Anyway, like so many of them, this thing installs in your Android phone, and they just put the retrieved data in some unsafe vault that has SQL injection, so people are able to just dump out email addresses, plain text passwords, and other sensitive data belonging to 62,000 users. And so this has happened over and over again. These stalkerware companies seem to be only a small step from just malware and really sleazy and insecure in their practices. But the thing that struck me is I think I now have 6 students who tell me they keep getting hacked. And I imagine this is probably what's happening. They're probably using these commercial stalkerware apps on their phone. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
so that's
Could
another
it
one of
be?
them. And Call of Duty, apparently. Call of Duty, I've never played it, but it's a popular Windows game. Apparently, the latest version has remote code execution vulnerability. So while you're playing the game, somebody hacks into your machine. So, and this is one of the many reasons people don't like you playing games at work. I know it used to be you play online games and they attract DDoS attacks because that's how you win the game. You DDoS the other guy so he can't move while you kill him or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Huh.
oh, here's one I thought you might have a response. What is the richest company in the world? What do you think?
Uh, is it a tech company or a non-tech company?
Oh, this tech company. The top three are all tech companies.
So
So
is it Nvidia?
it is. And who's number two?
That I don't know.
See, I remember 3 or 4 years ago, it was Apple, and Apple is richer than the whole US government. Now it's Nvidia, and close behind it is Microsoft, and Apple is number three, pretty far behind.
Really?
Yeah,
Well, there was a discussion about Apple. What has Apple innovated lately?
that's the issue. Apple stuff is getting kind of old, and they don't have a new hot thing. They have a really loyal fan base, and they make a lot of money, but Nvidia has the hot new AI thing. I wouldn't have put Microsoft at number two, though, but the only thing I knew you knew exciting from Microsoft is Azure, and that's also getting kind of old. But anyway, but Microsoft is heavily invested in a new AI, although I don't think they're making money from it yet. Anyway, they're right behind Nvidia.
No, so Microsoft's not making any money off of AI. Apple's not making any money off of AI.
Apple,
Apple's not really innovating anymore.
that's right.
Uh, let's see. I was debating between Microsoft and Alphabet, Google, but
Yeah, so
Google hasn't
Google's
done
not up there.
anything either.
Yeah, and I'd like to know what Microsoft's making all that money from. I think it's Azure, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
I think for the last decade or so, I've heard the OSs don't really make much money. It's Azure that's the big cash cow.
Yeah,
But then there's
yeah,
Amazon because Amazon has an even bigger cloud. Why isn't Amazon up there?
yeah. So Amazon's behind Apple?
Yeah, it's not in the top three.
How could that be?
Well, if you think
Hmm.
about it, almost everybody buys an iPhone. A bunch of people buy Macs. I think their customer base is larger than Amazon. Amazon, not everybody is even a Prime member. And if they were, that would still be probably less money than anybody that owns an iPhone. So I think they might have a smaller customer base. And retail, I think, is a small margin. Now, practically everybody has bought something from Amazon, but I don't know. It's interesting to analyze because
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
certainly everybody has bought stuff from Amazon the way everybody has an iPhone. So in that simple sense, you would think they'd be right up there. Anyway, maybe they have different profit margin. I think Apple has a really high profit margin. I mean,
yeah. Apple has a high pro. Yeah,
think they
yeah,
build that iPhone for like 300 and sell it for 1,000. And I think Amazon has a typical retailer profit margin of just a few percent. So that might be the big difference.
yeah. That's probably right.
Yeah.
And Sam, I brought this up before. I didn't get this. You didn't get this because I asked you about this before. But this has become a big stir. Are people going to trust Apple? Because in the Apple Wallet, they released an ad for Brad Pitt in the F1 Formula One movie that he was in.
Yeah. I mean,
Have
that
you
I remember
have you
before this.
heard about?
No, I think I heard about it only from you. And I remember a few years ago, they pushed out a U2 album that nobody wanted in iTunes or something.
Yeah, but that's a little bit different. This is Apple's wallet, which is secure, and they're using it for advertising.
Yeah, it didn't happen to me. And I use Apple Wallet. That's certainly a bad idea. I mean, nobody should touch that wallet but me because that's your money. This is like, Elon said he's going to make Twitter into the banking app everybody uses. And the problem is nobody trusts him. I mean, other than that, he's probably right that it would be convenient to use Twitter to send funds to your friends like Venmo or something. But I would never trust him with my credit card number or money.
Yeah, but I mean, this kind of goes against the entire Apple ecosystem
Yeah, yeah,
and the security and the trust that you have.
absolutely.
Yeah, and so this has caused quite a stir in the tech community, and it's going to be interesting to see if consumers are going to have an issue with it either. But I'll tell you, Sam, would you? So I'm an iPhone user. You got to buy an iPhone. If it comes up and if your phone got stolen next week, whose phone would you buy? Android, Apple,
I just buy another.
Samsung?
I just buy another iPhone. Although I hear the Androids are pretty good, but I'm used to the iPhone, and I learned how to use it, and I've integrated it with all my other stuff. I wouldn't be motivated to bother going back to Android.
So what would cause you not to defect and move away from iPhone?
Oh, a serious security problem would,
Yeah.
or some feature that Android had that iPhone didn't have. Like the Android has a lot more AI. If the AI was actually doing something wonderful, then maybe I'd go over there.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah. The only reason I would defect is if there's some security flaw.
Yeah,
And Apple has prided themselves since the beginning on security.
yeah, and
But now if they're going to yeah, now if they're going to start putting in ads,
yeah, that would
you
be.
know that
But Microsoft is closely integrated with Android, and Microsoft just pushes ads everywhere. So, I might just accept that as just the cost of doing business, but I wouldn't like it. And I think it might be
yeah, but
that Apple hasn't innovated, so they're getting desperate. Also, they're in big
right.
trouble because they promised all these AI features and then they weren't there. So they're trying to come up with something and starting to do stupid things.
Yeah, and Sam, I'm wondering just out loud here if Apple's trying to generate ad revenue
Yeah,
by copying Microsoft and putting ads in.
yeah, maybe. I listen to Scott Galloway's podcast, and he says what Apple needs to do is move into healthcare. And I think that would be a lot better. That would be another industry that has to know all kinds of personal details, and you really have to trust them, and privacy and security are top. And they probably could do well in that industry. Advertising, I think, is not an industry Apple should move into. That's contrary to their whole, branding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
so I got the last one here, which was pretty fun. So this Indian guy decided he needed a lot of money. So he applied for a lot of jobs and he lied on his resume and he gave really great interviews and he got them. So he's working for four startups at the same time. And when one of them finally posted, this guy seems kind of fishy. They said, what? That guy with that name, Prakash, he just applied to my company and my company. He's applied, at least 10 companies said they recently employed him. He knows all of coding. You employ him, and then he starts having all these excuses for not showing up to work. I'm sick. Oh, my aunt died and stuff like that. And he claims he works 160 hours a week, and never sleeps, never does anything but work. And but he keeps getting fired, of course, and then getting hired again. But he said he made a lot of money. Said he was bringing in $30,000 to $40,000 a month by working at four startups at the same time. So it's
Okay.
it's the days of remote work, and this is, of course, an issue.
Well, it's like the person that was doing, I can't remember what company. He was doing incredible work, but showed up in the office every day. And then the security team said, hey, he was a programmer. What's this connection to China? We don't do any business. There's a VPN.
I remember that.
Turns out that he was subcontracting without anybody's knowledge all of his coding work to a team in China.
Yeah, I know. And I remember at the time, you don't know whether to fire him or promote him. I mean, if you could actually, because that's what management would love to do, if you could get good results and if you could deal with the legal consequences and compliance consequences.
Right, right.
And
So I think he got fired.
I think so because he didn't get permission of upper management. But that's what everyone tried to do. Everybody tried to outsource stuff, and it turned out to be really hard to get good results. So
Right, right.
now they're going to use AI for everything, and they're going to find out the same thing that it's not really doing that good a job.
Yep, yep. But Nvidia is still doing well. I think their stock price is the highest it's ever been.
It is, and they're the richest company in the world now. So everybody is still pouring tons of money into AI, all believing that there's a huge pot of gold at the end, and yet, and OpenAI says they are zealots, they're not mercenaries. because I think another company poached a bunch of Meta poached a bunch of OpenAI developers by offering them more money. And he said, "We are not mercenaries, we are missionaries, bringing the joy of AGI to the world." He's trying to create religious zeal in his workers. And now they're promising AGI and even super intelligence within a couple of years. And none of that is going to come true. And this whole house of cards is going to come down. And I'm still saying, you bet $400 billion to build an AI data center. And what exactly is the product that everybody's going to pay for that AI produces? Where's this giant amount of money going to come in to pay for all this? And I don't see it.
Yeah. And Sam, I'm just looking here. I was curious. NVIDIA is worth just under 4 trillion,
Right.
$4 trillion.
And I remember something I saw a couple of weeks ago. We mentioned there was a European or UK analysis that said we project that AI will increase gross domestic product by 1% over the next 10 years. That's how much actual benefit is going to come out of it.
I see. So, I'm just checking here. Microsoft is 3.7 trillion, so not that far behind.
Right.
But Apple,
Yeah.
surprisingly, is only worth 3.1 trillion.
Yeah. And like I said, I wonder where
So,
Google and Meta are. And
yeah,
Amazon.
let's take a look.
Yeah.
Meta is worth 1.8, almost 2 trillion.
How about Amazon?
And what was the other one? Alphabet.
Amazon and Alphabet. Yeah.
Alphabet 2.8 or
Yeah.
2.1 trillion, 2.2 trillion. And who's the last one?
Amazon.
Amazon. That's right. 2.3,
Okay.
2.4 trillion.
So there's quite a pack down there with Apple.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So we got two leaders,
Yeah.
and then everybody's kind of
He
bunched
also,
together.
he also rans. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I would
Interesting.
not have put Microsoft right at the front, but that's where they are.
Well, I think it was after Ballmer left and
Yeah.
Gates left.
Yeah. Whoever's running it now, he's doing a good job.
Yeah, Satya Nadella.
Yeah. Everybody says he's a great guy. I was impressed at how he handled OpenAI's crisis. He really seems to be a good leader.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would have to agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's
Uh,
it for this one, unless you got anything else.
Yep, that's all I got too, Sam.
All right. So we'll have another one on Tuesday.
You got it.